Good morning. Unfortunately, over the last 7 days, or 10 days, we've faced 7 homicides in the city. Unfortunately, Wichita is not immune from what we're seeing across the nation. I want to remind everybody that last year, homicides in the United States were up 8%, as well as violent crime rose at a percentage that hadn't been seen in 25 years. But our dedicated staff has been working hard, nonstop, on these cases, interviewing witnesses, and we're having a fair amount of success. We have seen an upward trend in violent crime in Wichita over the last few years, and as a result, earlier this year, from May 6th through August 4th, we did a pilot project where we re-centralized some of our street crimes teams and gang teams, and to really focus on problem areas and problem people. And they generated 385 cases and made 375 arrests. We've talked about this, I think, in August as well, but they also made 434 gang contacts and seized 101 guns. Now, as a result of the success of these teams, we have decided to re-centralize them, and effective after the first of the year, we're going to ramp that back up to what we were doing this summer, because we had success seen with those teams. So there'll be a 10-person team that will be in special investigations, working on residential drug complaints in uniform and working closely with our investigators, and will also respond to violent crime in the city. Now, there is a nexus between a lot of our homicides in the last couple of years and drugs, and I'll talk about that a little more in a few minutes. Team number 2 will be the Violent Crimes Community Response Team. This is a 12-person team that will initiate and be proactive in their investigations into known violent offenders that are facilitating our violent criminal activity, as well as our focusing on our violent street gangs. They will also respond to violent crimes throughout the city. And lastly, there'll be a 16-person team that is a patrol community response team that will be working out of each of the 4 stations, working with closely with our community policing teams in addressing trends that are being seen throughout the Bureau. The other thing that we've done this year is we've partnered with KBI and ATF to do more analysis on our firearms and our shell casings that we find at scenes, in an effort to tie more crime together and be more successful in our investigations. You'll see we've had 8 domestic-related homicides this year. We initiated a project several years ago on a lethality assessment, where officers gather more evidence at the scene through interviewing victims and witnesses to see what we could do to be more proactive in keeping victims safe. As well as this year, we partnered with those in the criminal justice system to do an accountability audit, a safety and accountability audit, on how we handle domestic violent cases throughout the system, from the 911 call through to the end of probation, in an effort to make sure we're being as responsive to victims for domestic violence as well. Well, a little bit about the trends that we're seeing. Overwhelmingly, the majority of the victims and suspects know each other in our homicide cases. There is often a connection to drugs, as was talked about previously, and sometimes we see that the arguments that ensue often are begin or end on social media, and often fueled by social media. So the types of homicides, those 35 cases that we've had, are classified this way. 10 are argument related, 8 are domestic related, 6 are for unknown reasons, 5 are robbery related, 3 are gang related, 1 is classified as an accident, and 2 of those 35 involve officer-involved shootings. The types of weapons that were used: 21 of the 35 homicides involved a handgun, 4 involved knives, 3 involved rifles, 2 involved shotgun, 2 involved physical assault, and 2 are from blunt object, and 1 vehicle. So that's kind of the trends that we're seeing in these homicides, and we are working hard to ensure that we keep our community safe. And again, you got to remember with violent crime is that we count on the community to come forward and help us with tips in solving these crimes. Very rarely do we come across crime and without any witness statements or people coming forward to help us with information. So we, in these cases, of the 35, 10 of the cases are still open, and we implore people that know or have information to contact us. So be happy to take a couple questions.
Why did you guys stop the program? I know it was a pilot, but if you saw that it was working, why'd you stop?
Yeah, well, we didn't have all the stats, right? So the some of the stats come in later, and it gave us a chance to analyze it and compare it with previous years and get feedback from those that were involved. And then it took time to put it together. You know, we have to centralize the equipment and find office space, and the planning portion of it was probably the biggest part of it.
You've got like 30 plus people in that. Where does the staff come from? Are we taking officers off the streets? Are the officers splitting their time on the streets to this? Could you?
Yeah, no, they'll still be in uniform. They will be centralized under investigations, the two teams, right? So they will be focusing on the worst offenders, working with our intelligence unit to really target those that are causing the problems. What we have to look at is, you know, we see these increasing numbers, and what we were doing, it was time to look and evaluate on were we being effective. And we want to try this longer term and see how it works. And we're going to continue to evaluate it. When you talk about staffing, it has come up several times on, you know, how are we staffed? And earlier this year, end of last year, we had the staffing study that came out that recommended we should have 49 additional staff, sworn officers, and 24 support staff to get us to where we need to be. And the council and the mayor and the manager are very, very supportive of our effort to increase our staff. And we're working on a plan to bring that about.
Would you consider that lack of staffing or the need for more staffing? Are we in a crisis mode with that, or are we at a point where we would say that?
I don't know if crisis is the right word. I mean, when you look historically at homicides in Wichita, the highs were in the 90s, where there was numbers in the 60s every year. So, but you know, we do know that individual officers and extra officers have an impact on neighborhoods, and we want to really make sure we're focusing on community policing and solving crime, and you need bodies to do that.
I've talked to so many people after Officer Arterburn, obviously, because he was pretty plugged in. It still is plugged in, but it's really plugged into the local community. Some of the places where I went, some of the people that I talked to said, look, that's the kind of officer that's dedicated out on the streets. That's that community policing officer, so to speak. I don't know if he technically was, but I've had many people tell me that as plugged in as he was really good for the community and stopping crime. Have you looked into the accessibility of having more officers become kind of these community policing officers, where you can get into some prevention and talk to some of these younger kids that are thinking about gangs or violence?
Well, prevention is our ultimate goal, right? So after the crime happens, we're already too far behind. We want to be at that stage where prevention is what we're doing and is our focus, not reacting to crime. So that is the ideal world, Craig, in that's all we're doing is prevention. But there's no doubt when you have cops in the community where people know them and feel comfortable talking to them, we get more information. And the closer we get our cops to the community, I think the safer our cops are and the more successful we are in solving crime. So that's the direction we're going, and we're optimistic that the staffing plan will help us get there.
And about the money, City Council, they're supportive, but money's still an issue.
Right, they're working through how ultimately the plan will be paid for.
How many officers are there right now?
We're authorized for 650. We have 17 vacancies and 10 on military leave. So you can do the math on those, right? I can't right now. We do plan on hiring a class of about 30 plus in January.
Just one more time, obviously the community has seen 2 weekends in a row with the word homicide or murder.
Right.
Obviously people are talking about it. Just one more time, the police department really needs the public's help in order to solve these.
Right. There's people with information out there that we need to come forward and help us solve these. And this department and this city enjoys a fairly high clearance rate for homicides, and it's because people cooperate with us and tell us. And you know, our thoughts goes out to the families of these victims, right? It's easy to put a number instead of a name. And with each of these 35, we've had a lot of families and community members seriously impacted by that. And, you know, we can't forget that element of this as well.